What is up, dudes and lady dudes? Welcome back to Just Nuts, guys. Today I'm doing a pretty cool discussion video talking about structure decks. This is sort of like a discussion slash like top 5 video. Pretty much what I'm talking about here today is the fact that structure deck Rs have been a thing in the OCG. And pretty much what this is that Konami looks at an older structure deck and goes, that sucks now. That's been power crept so much. That's terrible. But it did really well when it sold. So let's go ahead and make a new version, and that one will sell well too. And it'll help like that, like archetype, whatever was in that structure deck, kind of catch up to the current climate competitively, right? And so we've seen this in a lot of things. I mean, looking at like Machiner's Commander, Mechanized Madness for us. Some of these don't even get translated into the TCG ever. I guess Warrior Strike is the only one that actually hasn't. So all the rest of them have in some way or another, but like Dino Smasher's Fury, Wave of Light, Lair of Darkness in a way. Like, you see what I mean? Like Zombie Horde is another good one. Just one important ones to know. Now, the top 5 video I'm making today is pretty much the top 5 structure decks that need to be next on this list. At least some of them, because there's actually not a lot of targets once you kind of eliminate things. And what I found was there were a lot of structure decks, like going through the entire list of all structure decks, there were a lot that fell into specific categories that didn't really make them great options for this to get another like redo, right? First one is like they've already been redone in some way. So a lot of these, like the Mechanized Madness, like, or like, you know what I mean, making up for all these old ones, right? As well as like even in other sets. I mean, you look at something like, I have my list here, you have something like it's a good example, like Heroes that can support like every year. Like they don't need, we just got Magical Hero, that was 5 new hero cards all at once, and we get Heroes every single year. We don't need a new hero structure deck. I wouldn't even be surprised if we got one, but I kind of decided to like cross that off the list because we don't need one, because we already just get hero support left and right. Stuff like Six Samurai got Secret Six Samurai in a deck build pack, right? Like stuff like that. So there are other options there. The other thing that was like a thing that made me want to cross some off the list were that they were just too new. Anything from like 2017 and newer just felt way too new. Like they're not gonna go like revamp decks that are like 2 to 3 years old. Like that's way not old enough. So anything from then, cross it off. There's like another 12 you can just cross off the list. And then the other ones were like random ones that just didn't make sense, right? So you end up with stuff like either ones that got like weird that I weren't even sure that actually like got retrains, but like kind of technically they did. But there were weird ones like let's see, like Realm of the Sea Emperor, which is just like the Atlantean structure deck. And so like we just got the Deep Sea archetype, which isn't technically Atlantean support, but they work so well together, it might as well be. So like it's not technically, but like still works. And then there's just ones that just like aren't even archetypes. Something like Blaze of Destruction, stuff like Rise of the Dragons. They're just like generic dragon and pyro like support. So like they don't really make sense to make like a new archetype out of it, right? They're not real archetypes, like exactly. So by crossing all of those out, you actually only end up with a couple of options at the end, and that's where we get to our top 5. So without further ado here, let's just jump into number 5. We've already been talking long enough. I'm going to start off with structure deck Invincible Fortress. This is a structure deck based off of one main boss monster, Exodia. He's like Exodia, Master of the Guard. He's like a very big, like 4K defensive monster, and that's all this deck does. It's like play defense, play defense, play defense. I'm not even entirely sure what the win condition was intended to be for this deck, because all of the monsters are just like flip monsters. So you just set them all, flip them up. Honestly, for the time, I don't even think all of them were that bad, because some of them were like Hanes, but with better stats, so they'd flip up and then bounce a monster, but then they could flip themselves back down. They had some cool gimmicks. At the time, they weren't that terrible. They weren't that slow. But nowadays, this is so incredibly slow. But here's something interesting that I think would be super cool if Konami wanted to take on this route was, one, you see like some Sphinx cards in the structure deck, but mainly the Exodia card is also very interesting to me. What if they took Exodia and just made like a new rock like flip deck out of Exodia? I think that's something where like we looked at, like they just did like the Sacred Beast stuff, which is kind of like a play off of like the Egyptian gods. They were getting like the new Ra, like the Winged Dragon of Ra cards in the next like Legendary Duelist. So I think Konami might like want to just take Exodia and make him relevant again in a new archetype. Give him an actual archetype that's like kind of cool like that. I don't know. They'd have to do a lot. I mean, sub-tiers are the only, I guess Shaddolls as well. So we've seen some flip decks actually be somewhat relevant if they had like multiple types of effects, or something in like sub-tier where you have speed, like ways like Hidden City to like speed up, expedite how quickly you're able to flip your monsters and get those effects to pop off. That could be something interesting. I don't know, but I know as a kid I thought this was a really cool structure deck, and I'd love to see a much more revamped version. Really playing off of Exodia though, keeping Exodia. Everybody loves Exodia, but like playing the old Exodia cards, even when you fire it off, it's not even satisfying. It's just like, oh, the game's just over now because I drew them, right? So this would make them an actual archetype that does stuff. So that's my idea there. Number 5, Invincible Fortress. Moving on to number 4, I've got structure deck Lost Sanctuary. Now this is a fairy-based structure deck with like one big boss monster, Master Hyperion. He's kind of cool, but he has like slow removal. He jumps on the field, honestly fairly easy, and that's like one of the best things about this archetype is like if you just made this deck like able to kind of like speedily set him up, he's actually like kind of a decent boss monster. He just doesn't provide like disruption is his only thing. But they have some interesting cards. Some things to note already that are still like somewhat relevant are the Agent of Creation Venus. That's like a nasty card in something like World Chalice. If they could make something like that work, that'd be cool. But other than that, most of the other agent cards have just totally been crept out of the game. So I would love to see some new like agent cards, like updated agent cards, maybe a new version of Master Hyperion that actually has disruption, a legitimately scary boss monster like for your opponent. And that would be really cool. I think fairies have never really gotten like their due diligence. Like they're always like fine, but they're never like, oh, fairies. Fairies definitely fall to the back burner to stuff like warriors and spellcasters and dragons, right? They always do, right? So I think this would be awesome to give them like a new revamped structure deck that actually was like, whoa, agents, nice. So that would be really cool to me. So that's it. Number 4, Lost Sanctuary. We then move to number 3, Onslaught of the Fire Kings. This one is another one that's like pretty cool, but like their heyday was like very short-lived. I don't even know if this deck actually made it to like top competitive play, but I think it was like at least like a relevant like tier 2 option at some point. I don't know, it's hard to say. This deck's old and I wasn't playing at the time. But they have some cool cards, and they have some cards that still could be like interesting even today. I mean, especially like this big boss monster. He's one of those boss monsters that like if your opponent keeps removing him via destruction, he's just going to keep coming back over and over and over again. You just keep reestablishing him, and that can be really annoying for some decks to try and deal with. So I know that, but they also have like a pretty cool like I think like field spell card that's pretty good. It's a little fragile, like can be messed with pretty easily. But it is like fairly strong in its own right. So I just think this is a cool one. And I think like a lot of people like those like attribute heavy like structure decks. So this one's like very fire based. Like that's really cool. A lot of people like the fire, water, wind ones because they're, I don't know, they have their own vibe to them. So a lot of people vibe with like the fire aspect of it, just like Salamangreats, right? So yeah, Onslaught of the Fire Kings is my number 3 option. Very, very cool. I would love to see them redo this. And we go to number 2, Gargi Rampage structure deck. This one is another one that needs to be redone. Gargi is actually at one point were actually a very legitimate competitive option, but that was just, what, 7 years ago at least? No, 6 years ago. So it's been a while. And this one almost creeps up to the line of like, has it been long enough for this structure deck? And I think it has. When you read a lot of this archetype's cards, this archetype has like legitimately no disruption that it sets up like on its own. Like yeah, I guess it can make rank 4s, but that's about it. So like Giant Hand and Dweller and Baguska are like its only like disruptive options. When you look at everything else though, it does have some interesting engine cards that could actually still be relevant, which is what you like to see, because if they're going to make a structure deck, they're probably only going to get 5 to 6 new cards. So it's really nice to see a deck that already has some nice pieces, some nice engine pieces to get things going, and then all you need to do is build off of that. As well as like you also have Gear Gigant X, which is a very nice like rank 4, which can just search you any machine. Not any machine, but I think it's level 4. It's either level 4 exactly or level 4 lower machine, but still that's pretty good. I mean that's like old version of Gallant Granite, which is still really cool. So I think this is a cool one. I think the engine is intact. I think you already have ways of like getting monsters on the board. You just need some ways of getting some disruption, some removal, some whatever, and that would be really cool. I always like the design of these guys. These are like kid-friendly, like goofy, like toonish, like Transformers kind of, and I always like that vibe. Not as serious as Transformers, but still a cool machine archetype. And I'd love to see these guys get a retrain. They're my number 2. And then we move to our number 1. This one, I know you guys know this one. And this one's going to look weird if you don't know what this is immediately. This is Structure Deck Yu-Gi-Moto. But it's not really Structure Deck Yu-Gi-Moto. It's really Structure Deck Magnet Warriors. I mean, really, that's what it is. When you look at what this structure deck was, it was like a retrain on the Magnet Warriors. You got Alpha, Beta, and Gamma redone. You got a new boss monster in Berserkion. You got reprints for a bunch of old other like Yugi cards. But then like when you look at it, the only actual new cards were just like 6 new Magnet Warrior cards. So this was pretty much the Magnet Warrior structure deck, and I would absolutely love if Konami could do this and do it right. Because one of the worst things about this is that this structure deck came out at the exact same time that the Seto Kaiba one came out, which had ABCs. And I don't know if you know, but ABCs almost immediately became like one of the best decks in the game. It was like and then like competed with like Zodiacs and stuff during like Zodiac like format and stuff, and like it was a legitimate threat immediately. It didn't even need other help. Like it was just already like pretty legit. This deck, however, is hot duty. Okay, they both have field spells, but this deck's field spell is hot garbage compared to Union Hanger. They both have a boss monster, but this deck's boss monster is hot duty compared to ABC Dragon Buster. And those were two of the biggest like things, the gripes you could ever have. I actually think that Alpha, Beta, and Gamma are like overall, if not as good as like A, B, and C pieces for like the ABC structure deck, almost better. They do stuff on your opponent's turn. They can do stuff on summon. They don't have to be sent to the graveyard from field, so like they can work a little bit quicker, and like they're actually pretty legit. But the structure deck needs like something else. What's nice is that I do think you still have core. Like I said, I like these 3 monsters, and they got Delta later on in another set, I believe, which is a nice card for them. But they really need like a new boss monster, some kind of good extending card, whether they just make a field spell that's like the same thing as Union Hanger, but for this deck, I'd be happy about that. But you need to do something to power creep the other one, because the other field spell is just, it's fine. It's maybe a one of, but only a one of in the case that you're already playing the other field spell and like a new good like better field spell, and you also are like terraforming, so cool utility. That's the only way you'd ever be playing it. And then like they need a new boss monster, something. This card does not interrupt, and you cannot consistently get out this guy, whatever he is, Empyrean Magnum, the super conductive battle bot. He's cheeky, he's cool for like an anime style deck, but like that's like this deck, like how are you gonna release this at the same time as ABC immediately become a top like deck in the format, and this deck does literally nothing ever. This is like one of the biggest crimes I've ever seen in this game, and I hope, because we've been seeing all these like structure deck R's over the years, and like a lot recently. I mean, between Shadal, Mechanized Madness, Warrior Strike, Mechanized Madness, and Dragoonity in like a year, we've pretty much gotten 3. So I really hope that's a sign that this structure deck could be, up next or something. Hopefully we get some Magnet Warrior stuff. I know that the Adamantipator cards could potentially work with this archetype, but not as well as like in archetype cards I think could. Like I think it only somewhat solves the problem, and then at that point you're just playing a bad Adamantipator deck instead of playing like a good Magnet Warrior deck. That makes sense. So those are my top 5 structure decks that I believe should be thrown into the Structure Deck R series for the OCG. Remember, we won't necessarily get all of them in the TCG if they do make them, but we will get them imported at some point somewhere down the line, and that's all I care about, is just getting them no matter what, So I don't know. That's what I'm thinking here, guys. Definitely let me know your thoughts down below. What structure deck, like what number 1 structure deck would you like to see them redo? Make it make sense though. Like I know if you love zombies, like we got zombies like less than 2 years ago. So like, is it less than 2 years ago? I guess it's about 2-ish years ago. So like we don't really need like another one yet. Maybe in a couple of years, but like not yet. So like make sure it makes sense. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, guys. As always, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more discussion videos like these in the future, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.